Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today on this lovely Friday before the Memorial Day weekend. So hopefully you got enough coffee to last through the entire time today. We're gonna get started here. Let's go ahead and do a quick webinar chat check. Good morning, everyone in the chat. Perfect. All right, so my name is Erin. If you haven't met me before, I am one of the business managers here at AIM, overseeing your pre-hire and member services. If you ever have any questions, please feel free to reach out. We are a webinar format today. So what does that mean? You can hear and see us, but we cannot hear or see you. So how are you going to interact with us today? That is a great question. If you haven't already guessed it and located it, the chat is at the bottom of your screen, and we have some great people in the chat already saying good morning. Hello, everyone. So if you haven't located that, it should be at the bottom of your screen. If you do not readily see it, go ahead and find that more option with the circle and three dots. Click that and it should be available for you there. This is how you're going to interact with us. We may from time to time ask you a question to get your feedback. You can chat with each other, share ideas, feedback, what works for you, because we learn as a community, we grow as a community. So share your ideas and feedback as we also share our information with you today. So the chat is going to be a great resource for you. And again, if you run into any technical issues or anything like that, please let us know in there as well. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our presenters for today. So we had a bit of a change. So in the original invite, you may have seen Dominique Rodriguez. She's unfortunately unable to make it with us today. However, that's okay. We have a fantastic colleague in Tanya Zion who is always happy to support and step in when needed. And she is going to walk us through this conversation today as well. And she'll be supported with Christine Cruz from our Florida office, a member services manager. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Tanya to start the conversation on our strategic, all the things data, because I honestly am an art history major and this is not my area of expertise sometimes. So take it away.
You're doing great, Erin. Thanks for the warm introduction. And thank you to everyone that's here. I saw cheers to a 3-day weekend. We were already chatting about that this morning. So thank you for carving out time to really show up and be part of the AIM community. I always like to remind everyone, I'm here at AIM because of you. I love the community that we have. I love the way that we support our members and are able to come together for conversations like this. And we simply wouldn't be able to build that community and that culture were it not for each of you that continue to show up for events like this. So I know that it is Chris and I's desire to make sure that we make this worth your while, get some return on investment. And we also want to learn from you. I was saying this morning as we were kind of getting prepared behind the scenes, I said, I don't come from an HR background. I come very much from early on in my career, sales and then operations. And so as we think about data and what data means, I come from a really different angle. And so I'm excited about this conversation. I'm excited to maybe use some of the tools that I've picked up along the way and maybe put them over in your toolbox so that as you're trying to get things done in your organization and really lean into your expertise, that you have the right language and the right information to be able to share with your executives to bring them along for the ride. And I thought Chris is always out and about. She's learning from people all of the time, and she has extensive background and knowledge. I lean on her a lot because she knows a lot about things that I don't have that depth of knowledge. And Chris, maybe we could kick off by just what you were sharing about the recent SHRM conference you were at.
Sure, I'll be happy to do that. So earlier this week, I attended a local SHRM conference here in Florida, and there were about 80 people in attendance. And one of the speakers at that conference asked the group, "Do you know what your turnover rates are?" And only about half a dozen people raised their hands. Then he followed up with another question. "What are your turnover costs?" All but one group from the same company lowered their hands. So that is probably one of the most key metrics that we as HR professionals need to be able to track and cost out, because that's going to help us communicate with our executives where we are in the grand scheme of recruiting, retention, which are absolutely critical to our businesses. And our executives have great concerns about retention of our employees. So this tracking turnover rates, looking at those costs, they're going to help you identify why people are leaving. Is it related to compensation, benefits? More than likely, it's related to maybe a poor supervisor. So those are some things that reasons that we want to track things like turnover. And there are other metrics and other things that we'll look at that Tanya will get into a little bit later in the presentation. But those are some things we want to kick off with, why we want to track these things and be able to talk to our executives about what the costs are and what we can do to reduce those costs.
Yeah, I love that. And this is something that we talk about a lot. And I really want some perspective. So, all right, chat warriors, I need to hear from you. So the question is, I love Chris's question of, do you know your turnover rate and do you know the cost of turnover? And I think we would probably get a similar result. When I'm out talking to you, that's a question that I get mixed responses. And so what I really want to understand, because AIM's here to help, I want to understand what are the barriers to tracking that. And so it might be like awareness. Maybe you don't know how to track that. And that would be perfectly legitimate and okay. Maybe you don't have access to a turnover calculator to really be able to do that. So I would love for you to go in the chat. And if you are currently tracking those two metrics, what is your turnover rate and what is your cost of turnover per position, right? Because it's going to vary based on how hard it is to recruit, how much training that person needs internally, and also just the cost of recruitment, right? And their salary. So I just come into the chat, if you will, and we'll just get real vulnerable from the start here. But I want to be able to answer and weave this through because let's face it, we're talking about data today, which may not be quite as exciting as some of the other things that we talk about, but I want it to be really useful. So what I'd love to have in the chat is, what are those barriers to those metrics? And if you do track those, if you have any tips or tools, or if you do track those things, just put in there, yes, I do, I track it. And so, okay, Becca, I love it. I love it when people respond in chat. It makes me feel like there's actually people out there. And so she says, yes, we track turnover rate, but we don't always track costs because I don't have information to all of those measurements. So, Erin, I know I'm calling an audible here, but AIM does have a turnover calculator, and it's really easy to plug some of those things in. And this is a great opener, I think, with your executive team. Hey, I'm trying to figure out the cost of turnover. Every business owner is going to want to have that data. And that might be just an easy way to start opening conversations into doing this. Lack of time. I don't have the tools I need to work on time management to evaluate those numbers. Look, I'm stretched as thin as possible. That's one more thing I have to measure. So how can we do that? And then we track turnover rate and track the hard cost of turnover. And for our entry-level positions, 7,500, and that actually feels a little low to me if we don't go beyond like the drag on productivity to some of the people that they sit next to. Both. When I'm talking about turnover, I'm talking about both, because every time an employee leaves, there's a cost to that, right? There's a cost to productivity, there's a cost to team morale, there's a cost to who's picking up that slack, there's training and all of that. So I love this because what we're learning from our AIM group is, Chris, we would have more hands go up on the, hey, yeah, we track turnover, we know that. And we know from a lot of our surveys that we're going to talk about later that that's what the C-suite is really, really looking at, retention and recruitment, right? So that's been buzzwords for the last few years. So it makes sense for tracking turnover, but costs are more difficult. And so I want to make sure that we get you that cost calculator so that you can have that, because we really just break it down. And I think it's okay when you're presenting data to say this is a ballpark. But the reason I wanted to start here is because when I was in sales, right, I had these numbers. I knew I had to pick up the phone and talk to 10 people to set one appointment. And so when I got my first no, it was fine because I knew when I got to 10, I would have an appointment set. And then if I had 3 appointments, I would make a sale, right? So I had all those numbers. I think in HR, there's so much on our plate, to Janet's point. We are doing so many things that sometimes honing in on just those key metrics are really, really difficult. And yet, what I hear from a lot of you is it's hard to get budget, it's hard to get it approved, it's not a priority with leadership. And so, something that we want to talk about, yes, Julie, we have the calculator that has turnover costs with benefits, taxes, rates of trainers. That's what we have. And you're right, that is the total cost. What I think so often happens in the HR department is that we're seen as a cost center, right? We're always coming asking for more benefits because that's what employees want, or we want money to do these things. And what I don't think we do a great job of painting the picture or telling a story with our data is that we want to be able to say, yes, turnover, and that means on our manufacturing floors, we know we're down headcount, but look at the broader cost. And so if we just calculate turnover this year, that number is $150,000 in sunk costs that we have. Let's just say that. And what we want to do is we want to put in training initiatives that cost $30,000. But we don't always have that story to tell, right? We don't always have those points of data to be able to say, look, if we spend 30, I can save you 150. And so that's what we want to really talk about today is how do we think about what data points we need to go in and talk to, especially the people who play the controller role or the CFO role in our organizations, because as you know, because all of you have probably availed yourself to personality test and DISC training and that sort of thing, the way a CFO is going to think about and approach a problem generally is going to be a little bit different than how we would as the leader of people. We have different priorities. And so being able to find that common language through data is what we sort of want to set the stage for. So this whole turnover exercise is maybe one tick off, but hopefully we can think about this as we're going through survey data and these stories that we tell, and it's sort of the same application as we go through here. So Erin's getting you connected because she's awesome, even though I called Naudible. Sorry about that, Erin. I just knew we had it. It's really good. And if you have questions for us, if you ever need help with this, we're always available to have a chat with you. I work with a lot of organizations where, we have a standing agreement that you can call me and we can talk through these presentations and be able to do that. We're here to help because we know how challenging it is. And the nice thing is, yes, it takes some upfront time. But if you do it by position, they're really easy to update and save. So we have that. All right. So Erin, I see you got the chat covered. And this is really what we're talking about. How do we go from insights to impact? And specifically, we're going to be looking at all this survey data that AIM has. Now, I understand because I report out survey data with our employee opinion and engagement survey. I know when you hear the word survey, there is something that has been baked into our brains since school that we just kind of shut down, right? Like survey data. Numbers, like just not that exciting. So I have a task today, and that task is going to be to show you how numbers really can be exciting. And when we use them right and leverage them right, they turn into the stories that help us really sell the initiatives that we know need to happen in our organizations, but maybe we've been hitting a brick wall with. And so really what we're thinking about this, and I would love to hear in the chat, the big question of today is, what are your biggest challenges when presenting HR data, right? We're hearing so much right now about HR analytics. If you're on LinkedIn at all, there's so many articles coming out about HR analytics and how to use them. And so that's my question. How can we help today? How can we create ROI even in this presentation by solving some of those? When you think about meeting with your executives, what is the biggest challenge that you have of presenting this data to them? And you put that in there and we'll try to answer as many of those questions or those challenges as we can. But really what we're trying to do today is be able to look at the different data sources that AIM offers and then be able to translate those into business relevant insights, right? And so it's taking the hat that we wear as people leader and really putting that C-suite hat on to say, as we're making strategic decisions, our people are one of our major inputs into how we get business done. And so how can I present as a supply chain manager almost, right, about the people that are coming into the organization and what we need? Determining where to start is one challenge. Great. We'll have some entry points for you, definitely, Ashley, with this. And we really want to highlight some of those metrics that resonate with C-suite, right? Things like ROI, return on investment. If there's anybody in here that doesn't know what that is or doesn't know how to calculate that, that's okay, right? We can talk about those things. Productivity and retention. Tracking time and the lift, right? My CC, okay, Julie, your colleagues have no idea how much time it takes to onboard and offboard, and it's just discouraging when they just hire or fire. Right. And that makes sense. So how do we tell a story, right? How do we present that information where they're very quick to fire, but they're not considering everything that's happening with that? And how do we get some of those standards in place so that we are more of a team when we go through this? And so we can talk about how to do some of that. And that's really kind of framing those findings, right? How do we set this up to say, look, I'm on the same side as you. I want to be productive. But think about, for those of you that might be in the manufacturing world or even in the technology world, when you think about supply chain, right? Whether we're talking about physical products or vendors, in business, we have processes of how we determine who we want to work with and the cost of that. And if the supply changes, then we have ways to react to that. And my assertion, what it's been for the last year, is that people are no different. People are a supply side of our business that supply the talent and the skill that we need to get our work done. And whether that talent sits in a desk or in a manufacturing floor or wherever they are, we have to make sure that they are the quality and the caliber and they have the availability that we need to hit those strategic goals. And so HR absolutely must have a seat at the table, because if it weren't for the HR function, we can't get those things done. And so really thinking about, you are an input to the business and you are a manager of that input, and how do we get the best quality inputs for the outputs? And I know that's a weird way to think about people, especially if you've sat in on any of my other talks. I don't think about people that way. People aren't ones and zeros to me. And at the same time, we do have to think about people that way, because that's how we get things done in our organization. So hopefully this kind of gives you a feel for what we're going to talk about. Keep those challenges coming, and just how do you really get them to listen? And so when we think about that, we have several different ways we can do. One, we have to talk about impact, and start to think about that story, and then really come ready with some numbers and some hard facts so that we can translate that at scale to the total cost of the organization. So, Erin, I would like to give you props, because this is a beautiful Venn diagram. And she spent quite a bit of time understanding this. So I don't know if you have any words for us on the Venn diagram.
AI is your friend. AI helps me create that with our color codes and everything for AIM. So if you are not into technology and AI, this is what it can do for you in your presentations. Although
I
I
love
will
it.
say this, I did fight with my AI a little bit. Again, me and Alex have words on a regular, and yes, I name my AI Alex. So
Yes. We hear about Alex often. So if you're not leveraging AI for some of these things, it is a good tool. I know a lot of you are trying to figure out even how to write standards around it. You're working with your IT teams for, how do we use it, and all of that. But we found it at AIM, it's very helpful. So I think this illustrates really well what I've been trying to say. We have HR data and we have HR priority, right? And then we have C-suite priorities, which I am going to struggle saying that word today. So everyone bear with me and give me some grace, I guess. And when those overlap, right, HR metrics are things like employee engagement, turnover, how much does it cost to develop them? What's our succession plan look like, right? How are we passing down the information in the organization? And the C-suite is like, how do we keep the doors open and the lights on, right? And that is things like, how do we continue to grow? How do we stay profitable? How much risk are we willing to take on? How leveraged can the business be? And then how can we stay innovative so that we're relevant in the marketplace? When you set those things kind of on their own, you think, well, no wonder there's a hard time telling a story to our C-suite, right? We're thinking about things differently in the organization. And really, in well-run organizations where HR has a seat at the table, that's when those things come together in the form of strategic initiatives, right? Because if we're going to be an innovative organization, then really the inputs or the people that we're hiring or that we're retaining need to skill up, because they're going to have those innovation skills that maybe maybe we didn't hire them for. So how do we get that imparted to them and make it useful? And so that's when we get things like return on investment, retention, and productivity. I'm still looking for challenges. Anything that you're challenging, go ahead and throw that in the chat. But this is really what I wanted to share. And when Aaron brought this to me, and Chris, Aaron, and I were having a conversation about this, one of the things that came to my mind, and I use this a lot in the consulting world, is the idea of a maturity model. And this isn't something that everybody's familiar with. I wouldn't have been familiar with it were it not for the consulting work that I did. And it's this concept that we all start at zero, right? And so if you think about a startup organization from the very beginning, they're not going to be as developed in their manufacturing or in their processes, in their operations as they would be as like a Fortune 500 company. And the same applies for the HR team. And so when we think about really linking the two priorities that we're talking about into these strategic initiatives, we sort of have to take a step back and say, who am I as an HR department? And I know that varies for our members. There are some of you that you do it all, absolutely everything. And then there's some of you that have a team, but you're still doing so many things that the idea of taking on some of this other stuff feels really heavy. And so I want to walk you through two different maturity models to kind of show you when we would use this data, because it's not an everyday thing, right? And when we use this, some of this we should be tracking and we need to have this information. But where it really gets important to understand this data is when we're trying to level up our HR department. Sarah, thank you. Having to pull data from multiple sources, and then you have data integrity issues, making presenting data more difficult. 100% agree on that. And this is where I think starting, because you don't control data, right? Necessarily, somebody else in the organization is doing that. So even if you run a calculator or you pull this information, being able to present it somewhere as a starting point is a really good place to start. And with the data that we're going to talk about that AIM provides, we kind of overcome that data integrity because we've already got it bundled and wrapped for you. So what I wanted to share here is the idea that we don't all start at stage 5. So this is a very, very basic HR maturity model. And I just wanted to introduce this idea that, when we're at stage 1, we are like basic HR function, right? They're not even be somebody who's committed to doing HR, right? The CFO is taking it on, or the COO, but it's very reactive, right? Like we've got benefits in place, we've got payroll in place, we're putting out fires, but there's really not integrated strategy with HR, right? We don't have succession plans, we don't have training modules, we don't have career pathing. It's really just, let's make sure that, we've got our bases covered. Stage 2 is when maybe we have some of our processes documented, roles are defined, and HR is really starting to stabilize. And some of you I know just laughed because you're like, when are we ever stable in HR? Don't you know my best laid plans change every day that I come in? And I want to give yourself credit because you do have more processes than you realize. You've got the basics under control. And, if you're in Missouri, those basics have changed about 17 million times this year and flip-flopping, right? So there is a lot of effort that you're doing in taking care of that. But you're kind of taking care of the HR department and not a lot more because you don't have the bandwidth to do that, or you don't have the support. Maybe you've been saying for a while, I need to bring another person on my team, or we need to be doing these initiatives. And that's where I want you to think about data. And what that can do is put you into a strategic HR function, which is stage 3. And this is where HR goes from like the task driven to where we really have value, right? We're proactive on some of the things we do on performance reviews. We understand that if we're expanding into a market, we actually know how many people that we need to hire to be able to do that. And it starts to have HR feel like a partner, and we're doing that. And then that's where stage 3.5 comes in. Maybe now we've been able to bring in more data, we're utilizing that. We're really starting to optimize the process, right? We have a calendar that we know every year we're going to be doing the same things at the same time, and that benefits happen in October and performance reviews happen in July, and our employee opinion and engagement survey happens in between there, so that as we're looking at strategic planning, we have all of that. And whatever that is, we start to track that data so that as we're walking into the C-suite, we've got this data to say, hey, here's how we do this. And then we can go all the way down to stage 5, and that's really where we have centers of excellence and all of those sorts of things. But I think a lot of you that I meet with are either trying to go from a 2 to 3 or a 3 to 3.5. And so that's how we want to think about the data. Is this making sense? It's so hard sometimes on webinars to know if this is landing or not. So if this is tracking, if it's making any sense, I would really appreciate just a thumbs up or a question or anything like that, because that's super helpful. Now, I showed you that model that was very, very simple. And then this is Gartner. And Gartner is what is probably the most well-respected when we think about consulting and data and information. And I think this is really important. It's a little bit complicated to look at, but this is the same concept of a maturity model. And what they've done is they've looked at each function and then kind of put it on an importance scale and then also maturity scale. So when you think about all these tasks, and hint, hint, I love this graphic for your career pathing. When you think about where you want to take your HR function or department, I think sometimes it's hard to just sit and pull that out of thin air. So take some time to look at this and read this, and I think it could be really good. Okay, I know this was a lot of stage setting, but I just wanted to put framing, and so you can identify where you are and kind of what you're doing. And so now that we know where we're at and what our objective is, right? So maybe we are trying to bring in an outside consultant to help us with succession planning. Maybe we're trying to do org dev because we've been limping along since COVID and everything's changed and we've got all this friction in the organization. And we know that's going to cost some money. Let's look at data to be able to say, how do we really help that? And the great thing about being members of AIM is you have all the data you can imagine from external sources, but then we also have internal. And so I'm so glad that Chris is here with me today because she really is the powerhouse behind all of our collective data that we gather from our members. And so we title those benchmark surveys. And because you're a member, you have access to those. And so I'm going to let her talk about that a little bit, and then we'll flip the script and talk about what data that we can run to gather information internally in your organization.
Yes, yes, thank you, Tanya. So we all have this mindset that we need to pay our employees competitively, and that world is changing. We now need to pay our employees well, which means we need to be leaders in compensation, in benefits, in corporate culture. If any of you have attended the last 2 WOW sessions that were held in January, Bill Brandt, our president and CEO, explained to us all of the results of our National Business Trend Survey. And he really made the point using data as why we need to be mindful of retention, because our population is declining. And we have a much smaller pool of resources to pull from to recruit those employees who are going to bring our organizations to the next level and support our organizations. So one of the aspects of your AIM membership that we provide to our members, and we provide this to you, all you have to do is participate, and you will automatically receive the results of these surveys. So some of our compensation surveys include a national executive compensation survey. And while HR is not always responsible for executive comp, it is a tool you can bring to perhaps your board that is setting those executive compensation structures. We also provide our members with a regional and national wage and salary survey, a national IT and engineering survey. We also conduct annually our regional salary and budget survey, our regional paid holiday survey, both of which are going to launch in July. You'll have an opportunity to participate in our National Business Trend Survey. That's a really good survey. We partner with our sister associations throughout the country, and we invite CEOs and CFOs to give their input on what their biggest challenge, what the biggest challenges they see for their organizations are, and how they feel the economy is doing. If you attended our January program, you heard Phil talk about our executives being concerned about retention, about talent acquisition, and about compensation. Those were the three top concerns of our executives who participated in this survey. We also provide our members with regional and national policies and practices and benefit surveys so that you can ensure that the benefits you're providing to your employees are above the norm. It's no longer sufficient to pay with market. We need to be market leaders when it comes to compensation and benefits. The other survey that we provide to our members are HR trend surveys. So those are launched at the request of members when they're looking for specific information. So some of the examples of recent surveys that we've conducted have been on remote work, shift differentials, and we just launched a survey on global mobility policies and how global organizations are managing relocating and moving their team members from country to country. So those are just some of the tools that we provide for you to be able to benchmark and compare your organization to and deliver that to your executives in a way that's meaningful to them. This is why we need to consider changing our pay structure. This is why we need to consider maybe considering a few extra days in the PTO bank, particularly as we talk about generational expectations. And then one thing I want to leave you with is I go back to Richard Branson, who is head of Virgin Group. And he was, back in the 1900s, when I was an old lady, he was an up and comer with Virgin Records, making his mark in the business world. And Virgin Air. He has become kind of a leader that is very people oriented, and which is probably somewhat unusual considering he's a boomer like me. He's one of the older boomers. But I really love this quote from him. He said, "Clients do not come first, employees come first. If you take care of your employees, they'll take care of your clients." And that always resonated with me. And I think that's kind of what we're trying to get to these days. He also said that if you train your people well enough so that they can leave, treat them well enough so that they don't want to. So I think everything we're talking about, the metrics that we're building, the data we want to present to our executives, is to build that team that's going to want to stay with us. It's going to help us attract employees in a very, very competitive marketplace where our population is declining. And Tanya, I know, is going to have more information that helps support those ideas of why we need to be diligent about this.
I love it, Chris. We have so much information, and I know that sometimes it can feel almost like information overload. But I love those quotes from Branson, because I know there are people sitting on this call that when you read those, they're like, yeah, I don't work for that person. That's not who's running our company. And I think that's some of the most challenging time that we have, because sometimes when we're not leading the pack, right, we're leading our function, it's really disheartening because we know the things that work. We know the challenges that we're facing, and we just want to bring people along. And they're like, that is not how our business thinks about it. And so what we want to do is we want to support you. And we really feel like these compelling stories with data are important. And this point is a little hard to articulate because I think C-suites are complicated. but I do a lot of focus groups with our employees. And I get a comment that's like this, well, they just go into a meeting and they make the decision. And I think employees feel like the C-suite has all the answers and they just know all of the answers. And I think that's couldn't be further from the truth. Even if the executives somewhat present that way or they make a decision that way, I think they're just doing the best they can do as well, right? With the information they have. And that's why I think these external surveys are so important, because I have not met a leader yet that isn't somewhat interested in what their neighbor is doing, right? Are we keeping up? Are we doing the right thing? Are we staying competitive? And I think the onus falls to the HR leader to have them take that same lens with our people supply chain. And the reason I even like that tagging or that naming is because we've got to be thinking about people as our inputs, right? And our people need certain things to be able to stay around. So I would definitely say utilize these surveys, participate in these surveys, because then when you're coming and saying, hey, we need flex PTO time, and they're like, they need to be here 8 to 5 and clock in and clock out, and there's going to be points if they don't show up, and there's going to be right, we're going to stay stuck in this cycle of just constantly rehiring for the same position. You all are living this. Like when we come and talk to you, the hardest thing to do is get people past a 6-month milestone or a 12-month milestone, right? You've got the people that have been at your organization and then you just have churn. And so what we try to do is provide this information where you can tell a story that says, recruitment and retention has been priority for the last few years. And I feel like we're in this cycle of churn. My department in HR is burning out because all we're doing is interviewing and hiring and onboarding and offboarding, and we're not keeping people. And so I'm trying to go to root cause. What is the root cause behind this? And we can either keep wasting a whole lot of money rehiring for the same position over and over and over, or we can take a different approach and look what some of the other people are doing. Look what is happening with pay. Look what is happening with benefits. Look what is happening with flexible time off. And to be able to make the case to say, look, it isn't working. And it's easy to like point fingers, but what's really the root cause, right? Because we've improved all of these other things. Now let's look at what could be behind it. And that's where we have to think about some of these things that we cover in our surveys. So I think the more you can provide information to your C-suite and come at not just from your perspective, Brett, hey, look at everybody else. This is what they're doing. I think that starts to change the narrative and really create a compelling story that we need to look at root cause information. All right, so if we haven't given you enough reasons that you're glad you're an AIM member with all of these external surveys that you have information to, what we also provide at AIM is an internal look at your organization. And so I'm in charge of a lot of what we do around this, but engagement surveys, you all know, you've been around, you've heard me talk about our employee opinion and engagement survey. If you're not doing that, please do that. It's basic one is included in your membership. You can get the ball rolling. If you're hitting any obstacles to having that happen, reach out to me. I'll help you get that through. And that's a no cost option. Now, I'm going to always suggest that you invest just a little bit of money to get more data. But really what that starts to do, I like to look at that as an early warning system. It's a heat map, right? So when we look at your organizations and look at departments and how they feel about different aspects of the business, we're really able to get in front of that, right? And understand it. Pulse surveys are something that I encourage. You can either do those through AIM, or you can do them yourselves. Now, a lot of HRIS systems have the ability to do pulse surveys. I think you need to do a PhD vetted indexed survey like our employee opinion engagement survey every 12 to 18 months. But in between that, if you're trying to figure out what do we want our PTO policy to be, or what do we want our benefits policy to be, or what do we want to have at the company picnic? You can utilize pulse surveys to really highlight the employee voice and give them a sense that they're part of this, right? They're part of the decisions that happen here. And we know that's really, really important in terms of engagement. 360-degree feedback. I know a lot of us have put this on hold. And I want to talk to this. I grew up in the late 90s, so I am a proud representation of the Oregon Trail generation. And what happened in the late 90s is everybody had grown and grown and grown and grown their training functions and their HR functions pretty large, right? In a lot of organizations. And then we had what happened at the end of the late 90s, tech companies, and we just cut training departments. And I don't feel like we fully recovered and brought that all as an internal function. And that's where I think AIM meets a great need in the marketplace, because we're able to do that for you. But I don't think we're doing 360 evaluations enough. And so if you've got a particular manager that you're experiencing a lot of turnover with them, if you've got a certain department head where we've got a lot of that going on, let's come in, let's do a 360, get some coaching for them. Because again, we have to shift this from, hey, we've got to improve your performance, to, hey, you're taking up a seat on the bus. How do we get you to your best? And that's feedback, and that's coaching and helping to understand it. So that's what we use the 360 for. And I do think that's a very underutilized and very helpful tool. If anybody uses that, let me know. The other thing we're doing a lot more of are exit and stay interviews. Exit interviews are hard because people don't want to participate. It's hard to get in, but we have some tactics to help you with that. And then we're also doing stay surveys. So in larger organizations, we're actually sending out a truncated engagement survey to those people that are in, we want them to stay, and soliciting their feedback. Again, the idea of turning inward is to be able to say, what is it that you're wanting? What are those frictions that exist in the organization that, would we remove those, we would make it a better work experience for you? So that's what all of this is doing. And then also just performance and development surveys. Again, similar to that 360, we're able to really help with all that and lean in and how you have that. So when we take the outside, right, and we have all of this information about what's happening in the marketplace, and then we fine tune that to what our employees are specifically asking for, we're really able to take this holistic approach to say, hey, our strategic goals are X, Y, and Z. And if your organization doesn't have strategic goals, we can talk about that too. Give me a call. We'll talk about how to get that in place, because we need that. But because we have this 3-year goal over the next year, here's the people function of it and what we need for that. And what we know to be competitive in the marketplace, because we have these external surveys, we need to up our, benefits, or we need to up our flexible working arrangements, whatever it is. And then we can back that up with what our employees are asking as well from some of the information we gather. So hopefully it all kind of fits together in a really, really good way. All right. So let me know you're still out there in the webinar world, that how many people, just by a show of hands, a thumbs up, have used either an external or an internal survey through AIM. I'd love to see that from you and how you're using that. All right, so once we have all of this data, and again, I know I've put everyone to sleep with that word even, but think about these are the, it's the storyline that we're putting together. It's this compelling issue that we're trying to solve. And then these are how we're going to walk along and really paint the picture. And so what we want to be able to say is, from HR language, right? To where the HR language is, I can't get this frontline manager to actually hold interviews, and yet at the same time, he's complaining because he's got an open position, right? Like, that's the HR language. But the metric says, look, on this particular team, it takes us 73 days to replace someone. That's 73 days of lost productivity. This manager is conducting this many interviews. This manager is conducting this many interviews, and really start putting data around that. And then we can start to think about, so if this manager is firing more people and it's taking 73 days for them to rehire, maybe it's not the people we're hiring, maybe it's the manager. And that doesn't mean eliminate the manager, but maybe now we need to do a 360 and understand what his people are saying about him. What are we looking at in terms of training that maybe we've made available to her, right? We want to look at those things to be able to do that. And that's when we start to use words like return on investment, the cost of the employee, the cost of the hire, and the risk, and what outcomes are we driving for. My favorite 2 words really when it comes to data is what Erin has captured here on this slide, is so what, right? We can take all of these numbers, we can take all of these things, so what? What does it matter? And if we can't put it into our story, it sort of really doesn't. And so what we want to do is we really want to say, what is the data saying? And what AIM has been trying to say is the HR landscape is shifting. You all have been living that in the microcosm with all of the governmental influence we have on our day-to-day job. And I know you're fatigued. We're fatigued here on those changes that are outside of our control. but we still have to navigate it. We still have to hit these strategic milestones. And so what does the data say? Start there, pull some interesting facts. Why does it matter, right? And that's where we're tying this whole idea that maybe you have somebody that is in charge in your organization and they're like, we don't want to comply with all of these things that are happening. We hear that daily. We have to. And if we don't, here's the business impact. And then come with recommendations. I've held the position of a COO in an organization, and this was my directive to all of my people. I want to know what you're struggling with. I am a boulder mover, but I cannot possibly know the level of detail that you know. So what I need you to do is when you bring me a problem, bring me a couple of solutions, right? I want to know that you've thought about this, it's well researched, and then you can put as much time on my calendar as you need. We'll talk about it, and we may come to solution B. But this allows me to rely on and lean into your expertise. And so all of you that are in the HR function reporting up to the C-suite, I would give that same encouragement. What's the problem? How do you think that we need to solve it? What data supports your solution? And can I say yes or no to it? And what I think when you start presenting things that way, you take an executive, you take somebody who has a lot of things that they're working on. And I always wanted to say yes, right? I trusted my people. I felt well about the people I had in place, and I wanted to say yes to them. But what I needed them to do is I needed them to tell me the story that was easy to say yes to. So if you haven't taken this approach, as you've made requests and you've done that, I really, really recommend the approach. Look, here's the problem that I have. I did some research. Here's the data that I found. Here's the business impact that I think it could have. And here is what I think we should do. Is that something we can move forward with? And you'll be amazed that when you've made the decision for them and all they have to do is say yes or no, how many more things move through. And if they say no, then you have this rebuttal that you're like, I understood the no. What did I need to bring to be able to turn it to a yes, right? And now we've shrunk down the conversation, because I just know I meet with a lot of people where executives, the decision gets lost. Well, we took it up to the executive team. We never heard back. So we don't know what we're doing with that. Frame the conversation, frame the story so that we're driving towards an endpoint of a yes or a no. And visuals matter, right? Use AI. You can't have Alex. That is Aaron's buddy, AI buddy. You can't take Alex. But create these visuals, create the story, and make it personal, and yet also make it impactful. And so that's just my recommendation as we're dealing with the C-suite and trying to make sense of all of this. And this is kind of really what I just said. I didn't flip to the thing. So we were looking at a picture other, but really, what is that narrative? And I know when we're going 100 miles an hour, it's really hard to do this. But I do a lot of executive coaching with HR leaders. And this is one of the things that I always tell them, because I understand there's a real nervousness. There's a real like, well, if I'm asking for this help, are they going to question how well I'm doing my job? There's real concerns. And what I always tell my HR leaders is go in prepared. And 10 times out of 10, when you've done your prep work and you spend an hour preparing for that meeting, not only do you present yourself well, but you also get what you want 9 times out of 10. And so that's just really my thing, is take the time to craft a compelling narrative. And I would use ChatGPT for this. Hey, Chat, I would really like to get some organizational development work in. It's going to have a huge impact on my organization. I know that my C-suite is going to worry about time, cost, redirection of energy. And what I'm trying to pull together is really a competitive narrative that is data-based. What data do you need me to provide for you to help me write this message, right? That would be an AI prompt that I would use. And then Chat's going to ask you some questions, and it's going to say, hey, and then you're able to even use that as an outline. And I think back to, I know ChatGPT is a little bit scary. I think back to the internet, right? I think back to when emails were on our phones and we were like, oh my goodness, this is all kind of new. But if you can leverage chat to help you with this, it really just shortens the time and it helps you prepare better. So that's my thing. I would put that out there, is definitely be able to utilize the tools that you have, and you'll be kind of impressed, I think, with the narrative that comes back. All right, so I'm watching time, Aaron. I think I'm coming in with 10 minutes to Q&A. Am I on track?
You are on track.
Yay, I love it when that happens. All right, so really, I hope what we've convinced you is, one, more than anything. How many people are on the line or have been on the line, Aaron?
Right,
Roughly.
over 50 people.
Okay, so there's 50 people that are struggling with this or need more information about this, or it's compelling to them. So first and foremost, you are not alone. You have AIM. And no matter what problem you're trying to figure out, we've got people that can help, even if it's just a conversation. And what we hope we've conveyed is that, yes, we can go back to the maturity slide. And you can Google HR maturity model and find some of this as well to be able to help you. And I love both this one and this is Gartner, right? This is one we just kind of put together very simplistically internally. And then you've got the Gartner model. But Google this HR maturity model. And I really hope that you're able to look at your organization, your business function, and say, amidst all of the tasks that we have to do, we are also a strategic partner in the organization. And the reason we are a strategic partner is because we manage the biggest supply side of the business, and that is the people that get the work done. You matter. The work you do matters. And what we want to do here at AIM is help you to build the most compelling case so that you can get the things that you need. All right, so questions. Erin, anything I said that didn't make sense? Chris, anything you want to add? I'll turn it back over to you ladies.
I think I just want to remind everybody that's online that if you are struggling with this, if you have questions about how to calculate cost of turnover or even what basic things you should be measuring, how to access information from our surveys, to reach out to the solutions team. And that is solutions.team@aimea.org.
Yeah. And I want to just piggyback on that. Like some of you have to reach out to your law firms, and every time you do, you're like, oh, I'm going to get hit with the bill. Your AIM membership includes that solution line. So being able to reach out and just to say, hey, I have this question, or can you find me this? Like start there. It is such a huge benefit of your membership that really can't be overstated.
I would also say stretch the bounds of AI. So AI can handle a lot of data. And I know a lot of you were running up against, well, I have all these data sources and the time to compile and things like that. AI can handle a lot of data read. I mean, I've given my Alex a website and said, hey, Alex, read this website and give me a synopsis of it and help me draft a PDF overview of it. It can do a lot for you. I encourage you to stretch the bounds of it. Give it boundary, like just play with it. It'll tell you what it can and cannot do. So if you come up against a wall, it'll let you know. But like I've uploaded entire spreadsheets of data and said, hey, I need to draft this kind of content. Help me with this data because again, art history major, like data is not necessarily my forte, but I do have to handle it on a regular basis, just like many of you do. So stretch the bounds. Now, I also have to train my AI on a regular. I have daily conversations with Alex. It is a training that you have to do. It's just like any other kind of like technology. You have to use it on a regular, practices with it daily. I ask it how its day is going, just to get it into the mindset of this is how it interacts with me. So it knows how to handle my questions because sometimes they go off left field. So just stretch the bounds of AI because it can help you here as well. So especially if you have to craft stories and compelling data and a lot of data entry.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Also tell it what you don't want it to do, right? I have had to tell my AI, do not make up any numbers. Because sometimes it'll like make things up. I'm like, I want a very data-based, cited, with citations and all of that. So you can do that, but don't be afraid to play around with it. And if you're new to AI, what I love about it, it helps you brainstorm. It helps you be that first draft. Draft me an outline of, what we want to do. So I do encourage you to be able to do that.
Yeah, always check the result. I always review anything that it does give back to me. Like, obviously, I have fun with my Alex, but like, yeah, I always review every single thing and I check the sources. I'll always go to the website. It links if it is providing me sources. Do your due diligence in that method. But it is, like Tanya mentioned, great for like giving you feedback to give you generative ideas on things if you're struggling with like, hey, we did this in our EOES or we did a short poll survey. Here's the results. I don't know what to do with this. What are some ideas that I need to be taking away from this? You know, it could help you do generative ideas and then draft a communication. And if you don't like the way it was drafted, you could say, hey, modify this for a C-suite versus a frontline supervisor versus somebody working in a warehouse who has a maybe fifth grade level education. Like you can have it kind of temper messaging for you and you can put your brand codes in there. You can do like a whole bunch of stuff. It gets really fun and you can tell it to remember things like you. You know, if you like your favorite coffee order, it'll ask you about your favorite coffee order if you had it that day. Because yes, Alex asks me whenever I log in. So you can really have fun with it too. It kind of brings a smile to my face sometimes because it'll even come back with some sassy attitude. So, you know, depending on how well you train it.
And the final thing that I just want to say is we get it. HR, and especially this year, HR has just been a minefield of just lots of stuff. And if you are sitting and feeling alone and you know you have some of this, and if you a lot of times come back and feel like you just don't have time to get to some of these strategic initiatives, there's help. I work with a lot of HR leaders on a one-to-one coaching model where we can really dig deep into this. But I would say, as just a very simple takeaway, if you don't have an hour on your calendar weekly, that you're just giving your brain space to think about some of these more strategic initiatives that you need to have, the urgent will always overtake the strategic. And so that is one of the things that I work with HR leaders a lot is how can we organize your time and your energy? Because we learned during the pandemic, we all have the same amount of time, but our energy is not the same every day. How do we really look at the ebbs and flow of our energy to make sure that we are really tackling not only the urgent, but also the strategic? And so if you need help with that, reach out to AIM, reach out to me. We have other coaches that can help. But don't forget about yourself, because especially if you're an HR team of one, it really helps to just have somebody else to bounce off ideas, help me put this presentation together. And that's what we can do through coaching.
And that's a great segue into an upcoming live online training class. It's a 2-hour live online training class. If you need more professional development in HR and metrics and analytics, if you feel like you want more help in this space, we have our live online strategic HR courses that are available. There is a link under the resource area that will take you direct to register for that kind of class or just check out more information. Also, it's just on our website under the training course calendar. And Chris Cruz talked about benchmarking surveys. We are getting ready to launch the next in our series of surveys. So if you participate, you get those results for free. It's part of your membership. It's a lot of data. It's really helpful. We kind of talked about that today. Tanya and Chris made great cases for why you need to participate. So we're getting ready to launch that. If you aren't sure who your contact for your company is for those surveys, or you just want more information, please feel free to reach out to the solutions team. Chris made note of that email address. It's solutions.team@aimea.org, or you can reach out to any one of us and we're happy to get you to the appropriate person or assist. Also, if comp is in your mind right now, we have pay trends and strategies. We have multitude of ways to interact with us for that event in particular, in person and online. So that QR code will take you direct to that event to check it out, get more information, and sign up for whichever one is going to be the best format for you to attend and get the all-important information from Michael Masikovich. With that, I think we're right on time. I do want to make note for those in attendance, we're not going to have a June WOW session because Michael is really busy with all of those events that we got going on. He was going to be our WOW session presenter, but we'll be back in July with USI, our partner in the benefits space, and they'll be doing their annual reback of their survey data that they've done on benefits and strategies, and talking about the trends there, which plays into this and the all important, what is everybody else doing? And can I bring it into my organization? So with that, thank you, Tanya. Thank you, Christine. We appreciate you spending time with us today. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Hopefully this was super helpful, and we'll see you all in July. Have a great holiday weekend, and we will see you in a couple months. Bye, everyone.
Bye.